off yesterday talking about interviewing, right? I know many of you are meeting with career services now with your resumes, and next week you'll be meeting with them with interviewing. So hopefully this session here will help you with that meeting with career services. So in chapter 10, we discussed that at some point you will what? You will have an interview. Most of you will have in-person interviews. I think what I'm about to say goes without saying, but my friends, please do not show up late to your interview. Please do not show up late to your interview. The mock interview or the real thing. Do not show up late to your interview. Why? First impression is a lasting impression. First impression is a lasting impression. I don't care how we try to explain it away. It's what people remember. It's if you think about it, you know, when you first meet someone, all your senses are up. Like it's not even intentional, is it? What happens? You meet someone for the first time, you don't know if it's a friend or a foe. So you are on high alert. The fact that you are on high alert and being especially attentive to someone that you've just met makes you remember the encounter. That's just human nature, and we'll talk about some of that a little bit later next week about these impressions and the types of impressions you can make on interviewers. So you just have to be hyper diligent about the fact that you have to make a good first impression. And being on time is it. I've interviewed so many people throughout my career for various reasons. And I'll tell you, the ones that I remember, unfortunately, are not the good ones. It's the ones that were a bit weird. I remember when I was looking for an English professor at a different school, and I was doing the interviewing. And this person, he got lost. And by the time he showed up, he was hot. He was sweating profusely because it was like 100 degrees outside, and he could not get his bearings. I really needed to fill that position. Unfortunately for him, it was a panel interview. So you guys already know where I'm going with this. I was able to overlook the sweat. You got lost. Of course, in the back of my mind, I'm like, dude, why did you not just use GPS? This is not going to be a good look for you. Even if I can overlook it, you still got two other people that you're going to have to get past. We were giving him, and I don't know if anyone has ever been really, really hot, and you know how you come in out of the heat and then it's really, really cold. It makes you sweat more. We had to get him towels. We had to get him water, and it was hard for him to regulate himself. And so, of course, that's what they remember. That is what people talked about. He was qualified and he did not get the job. No one's going to say, oh, because dude got late and he was sweating profusely. No, but it was just the first impression. And that is what I remember about him. I remember his ponytail and all that too. But that is what I remember. Like, that's not a good look. And he was qualified. He definitely was qualified. But it was, my boss was in the room and she didn't want him. So that was it. That was it. Like, you don't want to be that person, right? That's why I said it's so important when you're talking to that screener that you get the address and you know where you're going and that you arrive early, right? You want to arrive early. Sometimes it helps you to get your bearings, right? Even if you're not doing anything but just watching people coming in and out, getting a feel for the office. That's good. I remember when I applied for a different job and I was early. And so I was sitting in the lobby and the receptionist was definitely checking me out, not like in a that type of way, but just, I could tell that, he kept like kind of looking over at me and, trying to figure out what position I was here for, whatever. And so the person that was supposed to interview me, she had an emergency. And she wanted to know if I would sit and wait for her. I mean, she had a family emergency. She had to run, do something with her mom. And I had to sit there and wait for her. I didn't have to, but I was like, yeah, yeah, I'll sit and wait. So this guy struck up a conversation with me, and he was just like, you're going to get the job. I know you're going to get the job. Like, and when I say struck up a conversation, it was like, let's really small talk. But he felt so confident that I was going to get that job. And I don't know if it's because I decided to sit and wait for an hour for her to go do what she needed to do, but I did get the job. But I think it had everything to do with just me being on time, me being prepared, me being relaxed, me not, whatever. It did help. So that's my story, right? So definitely with traffic and weather, your towns, you should know what's going on in your city. Make sure you take those things into consideration, right? Also, you need to know, is there a parking protocol? Do you have to go through security? Like, those are the other things that you can ask. I said yesterday that I would give you a list of things to ask the screener. That's something to ask him or her, for your office that I'm going to. Will I need a parking pass? Will I need to go through security? Do I need to get a badge? Like, all of those things take into account if you need to get there 10 minutes early or 20 minutes early. So make sure that you're proactive and you are asking those questions. That it will be important, right? Maybe there's a certain building that you have to park in, or a certain place. Now, if you do have to do any type of virtual interviewing, it is a small disadvantage, because what tends to happen in person is where you are going to be the most effective. That's just hands down. We're human, right? You get to showcase a lot of different things, from your personality, your energies there. You get to see what's going on around you. When you are in a virtual meeting, it's really just that square picture. And many of us fall flat on video camera, especially if you don't have a super, aggressive personality, or you tend to have a facial expressions that are a little bit more subdued. You can fall flat in those videos, and a lot of people don't do well doing video interviewing. So hopefully, you know, you don't have to worry about that, but again, it could be a second interview, or somebody had an emergency and you have to do one. So you never know. But just be mindful that if you do, that you may just have to be a tad bit more animated than you would be if you were in person. My daughter, I teach night class as well, right? And I hate to teach when she's home, because even the inflections in my voice is deliberate. When I'm talking to you guys, I'm a little bit more animated than I would be just on the phone. And she's always coming in, checking on me like, are you okay? Why are you yelling at your students? I'm like, I'm not yelling at my students. I'm talking to my students, but she recognizes that this is not like a normal voice. So she always thinks like, why are you guys arguing? I'm like, we're not arguing. Go back to your room, right? So it is just required, because you want to ensure that you make a good impression, right? Now, if you do have to do that, meet with someone virtually, make sure, just like you did with this class, that you have the proper videos downloaded, video software downloaded, whether it's Zoom or Big Blue Button, or Microsoft Teams, or whatever it is. That's something else you can ask the screener. If they say, oh, we want you to do a virtual interview, just mention it. Will it be Microsoft, or will it be Google Meet? Like, what are we meeting in? Because you want to make sure you have it. Nothing is worse than you having to meet with someone and then you don't have the download it downloaded onto your computer or your phone or wherever, right? Then you're like, oh my God, and they're waiting for you, and that you didn't know it was there. And so now you had to go and do all of that and download it. It's a nightmare. Has it happened to me before? Yes. I remember years ago, and most of us have several accounts, right? You have your school account, you have your personal account, you could have a business account. So I had several Microsoft accounts, and I was using one laptop because I'm just lazy. Even if I have several, don't do that. I'll use one laptop, but then I may be logged into my Microsoft for work, and then something from school sends me an invite to log into a meeting, but it's on my work. And I'm talking about not teaching school, when I'm in school, and I'm logged into the wrong account. And that happened to me before. I remember one time I was going to interview, and I was logged into the wrong Microsoft account and I couldn't get in. And then the person had to say, well, you have to make sure that you're logged into the right account on your Microsoft, because we sent it to your Yahoo account. So you have to be on your Yahoo Teams. I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed, right? Like, you just don't want those things to happen to you. And on top of that, I think I was going for some type of IT work. I don't know what it was, but I was like, oh my God, these people are going to think I'm an idiot. But it was just because I forgot. I forgot because I got nervous and whatever, right? So you just don't want that type of drama. Most telephone interviews you won't guys have to worry about, except if it's a screening interview, then you may have to do it. In the most rarest of occasions, you may have to do a telephone interview in your industries, right? In my industry is common. Your industry, not so much. Again, unless it's just really just some last minute, the top boss, and you guys know everybody is different, so you may go to work for a company whose boss wants to run every single person past him or her eyes. Some others are not, and so they just may want to talk to you. I feel like I do have stories for days, but I even have a story regarding that same story where I was, had to wait for the supervisor to come back. She loved me. I met her in person, but her boss wanted to meet me, and the person, he was in a different city. So of course I had to do virtual. But the problem is, and if you're military, you can appreciate what I'm about to say. I'm an Army vet. He's a Marine. He was a Marine. And so we both are kind of like, we're on the video and I'm waiting for him to ask me a question and he's waiting for me to do something. So we're like, had this awkward silence for the first couple of seconds. And it was horrible, like, because I could tell he was kind of trying to give me the once over. And I'm like, well, I'm giving you the once over too. So we were just like, had this weird energy for a minute. And of course, he went back and he was like, are you sure you want to hire her? And she was like, yeah, I want her. Of course, he and I turned out to be, buddies. We laughed about it because I knew where he was coming from, because it's that same stoic attitude that a lot of us military people have, and it just doesn't go over so well, especially not over video. Now, maybe if we were in person, it would have been a little bit better. But true story, I almost didn't get a job because of that, because I just didn't know where he was going with that whole energy thing. So you just never know, right? If it's a telephone, I hate telephone the worst, guys, just because I think it's hard to really, gauge, what a person is thinking or wanting. But, if you have to do it, you have to do it. Again, just make sure that the best advice is just to be animated, be positive. Sometimes they say even wear a smile, even when you're on the phone, because it somehow it translates through in your conversation, whatever your energy is. So that's my little advice on that. So let's get into these questions, right? Because this is really the gist of interviewing. What are these questions about? How do I answer these questions? What do these people want to hear? All right. There are 3 different types of interview questions, and I encourage you to, in addition to reading the book, to Google some of this, not specifically for this class, but definitely in preparation for your real interviews. The 3 types of questions that are typically asked are grouped into 3 categories: general information questions, behavioral questions, and stress-related questions. Now, these general questions typically are designed to give the company a really quick snapshot of who you are. There could be varying questions that they ask. Sometimes they ask 1 or 2 before they go into telling you about the company. It could be something like, tell me about yourself. What kind of jobs have you had? Why are you interested in this position? Any of that type of stuff. Why do you want to work for this company? Now, the question that they really want to know regardless of how they frame it, it's really, why do you want to work for this company? That's what they really want to know. Why are you here? Yes, they've already read your resume. They already know your background. So you would ask, okay, why do I need to tell you my background if you've seen my resume? Maybe you just want me to expound on it. Yes and no. What they really want you to do is to weave a story that ends with their company. What do you mean by that, Ms. Taylor? They want to hear you walk through your resume as if you were on the yellow brick road and your story ended with applying for their job. So how do I do that? Let's say I am a VA. I'm in the VA program and I'm going to go work for a pet clinic, right? A clinic, right? Y'all know what pet clinics do. If you had a pet, you go there when you're sick, annuals, whatever you need to do, right? Miss Taylor, tell me about yourself. Now, I'm in the VA program. I have never worked in the VA. I've never worked with pets, right? But here's something. Maybe I had pets when I was younger. Most people don't go into the VA program if they don't like animals, so you've had to have some type of encounter with an animal, right? Whether it was with your grandparents' farm, you had pets, maybe you did some volunteer work, whatever it is. So whatever your encounter with pets is how I would weave that story. So I would say, for example, even though they're asking me about my resume, I'm going to get to it, but watch how I do it. I don't have a lot of experience in the VA program. I would say something to the effect, I've always loved animals. I've always loved animals. And prior to starting work, even in my youth, when I went to go visit my grandparents, they had a small farm, and I found that I really loved being out there with the animals. Throughout the years, I really took an affinity for large animals. Let's say this pet clinic deals with large animals like horses and cows and stuff, all right? And to affinity towards large animals. I knew one day that I would do some work with animals. Once I graduated high school, I went into customer service and I did this or that, just breezed through it. Then I started working a little bit in, whatever you did. I worked a little bit in construction, right? And I did that, but I still had this calling to go back and work with animals. Now you're leading them back to the point. I went to school and I knew that upon graduation, I wanted to work with large animals because I had an affinity for it. Talk about your research with them. I did a lot of research to find the right institution. They want to feel like they're the chosen one. And I found that your company deals with large animals and that you guys have a wonderful rescue program. And I thought that this would be a great fit for me. That's all they want to know. If you have bumps along the way where you've done work with animals, weave it into the story. You don't have to spend more than 2 or 3 minutes talking about this situation. It's the same if you're in the welding program, the HVAC program, the electrical program. There's something that made you want to be in this program. Even if it's, oh, I just found out about it, or my cousin was in it. Some people have family that own their own business. Whatever it was, you didn't just wake up and decide, I think I'll be an electrician today. Something caused you to want to do that. Does that make sense? So as you're telling your story, find a way to say why, even if you didn't wanted to be an electrician or love how electricity worked, maybe you liked tinkering with things. Maybe you liked knowing how things operate, even if it wasn't electrical. Find a way to start your story, touch on the work you've done, and end up to why you're in this program and why you want to work for that company. Does that make sense, guys? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. They just want to know that you're serious, that you've thought about their company, that, it's deliberate. They don't want to hear, I need a job. That is the absolute worst thing you can tell a company. Why is that? Because they're going to feel like, okay, so we mean nothing to you. Somebody else offers you a little bit more money, you leave us, and they don't want to hear that, right? They're paying money and taking their time out to interview you and paying for Indeed.com or whatever platform that they're on. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that you chose them specifically, which in essence you kind of did, even if you apply for a lot of different jobs, you still chose this job for a reason. So give them that reason. Make sense? That's how you answer these questions. Again, if you have some experience, touch on it a little bit more, but get to why you are there. Most times they won't ask about your strengths and weaknesses till later in the interview, if they ask at all, but they'll definitely want to know, tell me about yourself, walk them through your resume a little bit, but that's how you walk them through that resume. Now, here's the thing. How are they really going to dig into your past, your previous experience? Most times, especially if they know that you're new to this work, they really just want to know your soft skills. Most behavioral questions will deal with soft skills. What, Miss Taylor? But why did they put all those hard skills? They talk about, I need this, and that. And then they put one little sentence about soft skills. And then the whole interview is talking about soft skills. Isn't that some nerve? Because they will ask you these behavioral type questions. What are behavioral type questions? They want to know how you behave. How will you know it's a behavioral type question? Because it's always going to start with something like, tell me about a time when. Something to do with how you behaved in the past. Now watch this. Every single scenario, this is going to be very general. You've never done their work, so the question is going to be general. It's going to have something to do with, tell me about a time you A, B, and C. And I'm going to tell you what A, B, C means in a minute, right? Describe a situation when. Every single scenario that they ask is going to be centered around three different things: a customer, a coworker, or your supervisor. It could be one of the three, it could be all three, but every scenario is going to be centered around one of the three. Here's what you're going to do. You are going to make sure that you have a small little notepad when you go to your interview. Number one, it makes you look good because it makes it feel like that you're going to take notes and pay attention. But number two, what they're not going to know is you're going to have a little cheat sheet on your notepad, unless you're just really good at memorizing things, and then you don't have to have a cheat sheet. But here's what you want to do. You already know that they're going to ask you a general question, they're going to ask you a behavioral, one or two, and they're going to ask you stress. So I may have a little legend on my notepad, and I may have G for general. They don't know what that means. And I may know, depending upon what they ask and say, tell me about themselves, I may just have grandparent, or if I volunteered at a pet clinic, I may have a volunteer pet clinic, to jog my memory on what I'm going to say, because sometimes when you're in these interviews, you get a little nervous, right? So you just glance down at your notepad, be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna tell that story about when I used to be on my grandparents' farm, or I'm gonna start off with when I volunteered. That's just your little cheat sheet, your little legend. And then I'll have a B for behavioral. Now, you don't know which one they're going to ask, but you know they're going to ask something about a customer, a coworker, or a boss. It doesn't even matter what they ask, because here's what they really want to know. They want to know, how did you behave? How did you behave in that situation? Okay, well, what do they want to hear about? How did I behave? If it is a customer, you can already guess. They want to know, did you meet the customer's needs? They don't want to know how bad the customer was. They don't want to hear about you letting the customer know what the rules and regulations were. They don't want to hear none of that. This is a business. They want to know that you have the ability to problem solve. That you have the ability to problem solve. So I want you to think about a time in your life when you had to deal with a customer. If you have that experience, it doesn't even matter what situation it is. And how, if hopefully a positive experience where you problem solved and everything worked out. So tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult customer and how do you handle it? Most times it's not going to be their type of work, right? So it's going to be very general. So what you want to tell them is, oh, I was dealing with Sarah and Sarah was really upset because she couldn't get the discount that she wanted. Like you don't care about Sarah being upset. You cared about she thought she was supposed to get a discount and she wasn't and she didn't get it. So you apologize to her, you explain to her what happened, you work with your manager, he decided to give it to her. Sarah went away happy. They just want to know that you can problem solve. So I want you to have one Sarah story at the ready. You can just have a little cheat sheet that says Sarah, because you don't know. Or you can just have for the behavioral question, put a B for behavior dash Sarah, comma, if they're going to ask you about a coworker, 90% of the time, the coworker is not doing their job. 90% of the time, in some scenario, coworkers not doing their job, and they want to know that you know how to be a team player. What did you do? It could be something as simple as, me and Bob were working together, and Bob, was having a hard time understanding this project. So after work, I worked with Bob and explained to Bob how to get this project done, and we were able to complete it on time. It could be Bob had a car accident and couldn't get to work because his leg was hurt. So for 2 months, you picked Bob up. Any story where you helped Bob, you helped the coworker, and you got it done. They want to know that you a team player, and watch this, that you don't go in and just tell the boss. I know it's not the mafia, but they want to know you don't rat people out. They want to know that you can work with your team member and still get the job done. Because at the end of the day, they just want you to get the job done. They want to know that you know how to deal with that situation, whatever it is. You went to Bob, you try to help him, you're a team player, you guys got it done. If you've ever played sports, give me a thumbs up if you've played sports before. Anybody ever played sports? They say sport. This is why I believe sports is really, really good. I see a couple at, teaching people real life. If you played sports before and your team member was having a hard time, does your coach want you to go and be like, oh my God, could you get Billy out of here? He's horrible. No coach wants to hear that. If anybody's ever coached, do you want to hear that? Absolutely not. You want to see your team member doing what? Helping the other team member, because it's one team, right? If one lose, we all lose. And that's the mentality of most jobs. They want to see you help your team member. So I want you to have at the ready some scenario, put B for Bobby or put Bobby next to Sarah, just in case they ask you a team member related question where you helped out your team member and things worked positively. That's all they want to know. Soft skill type stuff. If it is a supervisor, 90% of the time it's going to be your supervisor is giving you too much to do, and how are you going to handle it? What do they want to know? In business, we call this managing up. They want to know that you have the ability to go to your boss and ask for clarifying questions, and watch this, most importantly, to offer solutions. Can you go to your boss? Because we all know how bosses do. They always give us too much to do. They forget what they told you. They're busy. Okay, blame it on they got too much going on, whatever. So can you go to Timothy, Mr. Timothy, can I talk to you for a minute? I know you just gave me this project in my email, but I just had a clarifying question. We were wrapping up, Project A's, and their deadline is coming up a little faster. So here's what I was suggesting. I was thinking if I can go ahead and spend a couple more hours, some extra hours to wrap up Project A, then I can start Project B on Monday and we can still get it done on time. What do you think? They want to know, do you know how to manage up? Do you know how to go to your boss and offer solutions? That's all they want to know. If it's a supervisor, solution based. If it's a coworker, do you still know how to get the project done? You not be a team member. And if it's a customer, is what? Customer's always happy. So I want you to have at the ready these behavioral type questions. How did you handle it? Even if it's something specific with some type of work that you've done, but typically that's going to be in the stress related questions. still problem solve, I got the work done. Does that make sense? That way, when you're in the interview, you don't get blindsided by them asking you the scenario question and you're like, and now you have to make something up. I encourage you to Google interview behavioral type questions for HVAC, behavioral type questions for electrical in your industry, trades related interview questions, and you'll start to see this pattern. Now, what happens if it's stress related questions? These questions, right? So you're going to have your little S. These questions are going to be what we call hypothetical questions, and they typically will have something to do with the work. Now they're going to ask you hypothetical. You've never done this work before, so behavioral can't be this work. Now, if you have done the work before, like if there's a scenario or if it's on your resume that you've done any of this type of work, then those behavioral questions may center around the work, right? They may infuse a little bit more of the type of work. But most times in the stress related questions, they want to know, can you react under pressure? But really, it's very similar to behavioral type questions, but it's going to be geared toward this type of work. So the hypothetical, very similar. Have your little S. Now watch this. No, it's probably not going to happen because I would say sometimes you can use those same examples, but if they're asking you something that's very specific to their type of work, then it's not going to be. But you could still have very similar examples, right? Because you may not they may ask you a customer behavioral question, but then they may ask you a coworker stress question. You see my point? So in the stress related questions, they're going to give you a hypothetical. Watch this. The reason why I say you can double dip on those answers is because they're still going to center around a customer, a coworker, or supervisor. They're still going to center the question around those three scenarios, but this time it's going to be based upon their type of work. So if you are working at a pet hospital and a customer, 9 times out of 10, what is going to happen? You got to give some type of bad news to a customer, whether it's the bill is too high, the pet is too sick, operation, the pet may have to be, put down. It's going to center around that, right? So your customer scenario is going to be, what would you do to do what? Keep the customer happy. So you just have to have in your head, okay, what type of scenario? If it's a customer, it's probably going to do something to do with money or bad news. How would I deal with that? If it is a customer for HVAC or welders, you guys already know it's going to be residential. 9 times out of 10, if they're residential, it's going to be a residential-based question. If it's commercial and it's project-based, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the customer is not going to be happy if there's a delay or the customer has a big change. What are you going to do with it? But it's going to be centered around their work. This is why it's so important for you to do research on that company so you understand the type of work that they do and what that position is, because the hypothetical is going to center around whatever that is. If it is a coworker with any of the trades, outside of VA, 9 times out of 10, it's going to have something to do with the person is on a different team. Maybe you're in electrical and they're in HVAC, or again, your team member is not pulling their weight. How are you going to handle it? You're going to handle it the same type of way, right? You're still going to handle it with what? Trying to help the person out, offer up solutions to help that team member out. And definitely if it's supervisor based, it's going to be, I would go to you, what would you do if your supervisor told you to do project A, project B? It's still going to be centered around that. You're going to do the same thing you would in the behavioral. I'm going to come to you, ask clarifying questions, and offer up a solution. That's all they want to know. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? Is it helpful? Does it help you guys understand these questions and why they ask? Right? The goal is to be prepared. That's all it is, right? And what are they really paying attention to? They're paying attention to your professionalism, those soft skills again. Does this person seem like a team player? Do they seem like they're in control? Do they understand it's all about the bottom line? Do you understand it's all about the bottom line? This is business. It's not personal. So they want to make sure that you know how to take yourself out of the equation and get the job done by helping the customer, helping the coworker, or helping the supervisor. That's it. And if you can answer those questions in this way and keep yourself out of it, you'll breeze right through these questions. You'll breeze right through them. Now, there are questions that they should never ask you. My friends, I don't care if you walk in there with a cane and Coke bottle glasses. They cannot say, are you handicapped? Are you sure you read the description on this job? They can't ask. It's illegal. They can't ask you anything about your age, your disability, your ethnicity, your gender, marital status, religion. You're like, what do you mean they can't ask? They cannot ask. The only thing that they can say is you said that you can do the job. You say you don't need any accommodations. You said you don't need any accommodations. So maybe you were playing basketball and that's why you have, that on your leg. But they can't readily say, oh, now if you walk in there in a wheelchair, if you roll in there in a wheelchair, of course they could be like, oh, are you going to be okay? But if it's a permanent wheelchair, then they can then say, oh, we're not sure you can do the job, but they can't just make any assumptions. I don't care if you look like you're 6 months pregnant. They cannot ask, oh, when are you due? That they can't ask that. And here's the thing, don't offer up it either. Do not talk about your personal self. You never know how that person on the other end will receive that information. Keep your business to yourself. I don't care if you just got married. Keep that to yourself. That person could have big old picture, their little wedding day on their desk, and they may even mention it. Oh, that's nice for you. Keep your business to yourself. You don't know how people will accept that. That person may be happy about them getting married. The boss may be mad, may be like a Scrooge and like, oh, here come another one married. And definitely don't talk about your children. Please don't do that. You don't want anybody having any bias towards anything that you say. You don't know how that's going to receive. And at the end of the day, it's none of their business. Right? I know sometimes we have a tendency to do that because we want to build a rapport, but you don't know these people. These people are strangers. Keep it professional. And it's illegal to ask. Most times they won't ask because if something is illegal, that means that you can end up in court. There have been people that have filed lawsuits because they felt like they were being discriminated against for ageism or sexism for the job, and sometimes they win. I know people that have in the interview process. What? You mean to tell me you can sue the people and they haven't even hired you yet? Yes, if they do something illegal, that's why it's called illegal. Can't discriminate. Right? So you don't even ask those questions. Stay away from it. Just get out of there. Right? And don't answer. If they, I don't even know how they would even try to ask that question about your age or disability. Most times if it's, your glasses or you're walking there with crutches or something like that, or if you look older, right? You never know. Sometimes they'll try to, ask a side question about your age or something. Don't answer. Laugh it off. Move on. Again, 99% of them know better because their HR has legal teams inside of HR and they know, hey, get out of there. Don't ask any questions about that type of stuff, right? And you don't have to answer. All right. So what kind of questions can I ask, Ms. Taylor Juice, right? You want to ask intelligent questions. If you do your research on the company, if you do your research and you know what your long-term goals are, most of us are going to have questions, right? How do you ask these questions? At the top of the hour when you are interviewing with these people and they ask you about yourself and you tell them and they tell you a little bit about the company, this is the time that you're sprinkling in that little, hey, oh yeah, I saw that about your project. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I was wondering how you guys need 3 people, and that's why, because you're filling in for that project. That's when you have that little report to let them know, yeah, I did my research. I didn't just show up here, right? If you have a question about something, you do not want to let on that anything is an issue. If you were reading and you've noticed in your interview, in your research that, oh, the training is going to be in Fort Myers, but I'm in Tampa. I have a question about that. That may be a problem for me. Just write it down on your little notepad. If you were curious about whether there's overtime, or if you have flexibility in your schedule, if you can squeeze that question in, that's where I went when I was talking about how sometimes those HR screeners are a little bit chatty and you are really wanting overtime, you can squeeze that in. Hey, do you know if they do any overtime here? Oh, yeah, we do overtime all the time. Okay, good. You got that answered. If the person's not chatting, you didn't get them out of them and you want to know here, you want to wait to the opportune time, because as you are interviewing, you are building, you're having a conversation, right? It's not just one-sided. Um, and if they say something to you about, let's say in the top of the hour, they're talking about the company, it's like, yeah, we have this big project and we're a little bit behind, and you want to know about the overtime. This is where you throw it in. Oh, so you guys are going to be doing a lot of overtime with that job? Oh, yeah, we're really going to be doing a lot of overtime. You wanted to know. Maybe you wanted the overtime. Maybe you didn't want the overtime. You're not going to let on that it's an issue one way or the other. Why am I saying this? Do not wait to the end of the interview to try to get your questions answered, because they could misconstrue that as you got an issue with whatever you're asking. Because the assumption is if you have a question, you may or may not like it, and then they're going to try to answer it in a specific way. You're interviewing this company the same way they're interviewing you. You don't want to let on that you like or dislike the job one way or the other. It's like buying a house. The same way they're not going to let on, most of them won't let on, some of them will, whether they like you one way or the other. So you don't want them to have any suspicion that anything that you ask could be a deal breaker, because you remember they're comparing you to the next person. So you want to ask intermittently, especially things that are a little bit of concern like flex time or maybe training. Don't let on it's an issue. If they're talking about it, oh yeah, because we did say that we were going to be training out of state. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, out of the town. I say, yeah, I saw that. I was curious about that. Yeah, but we decided not to do it. You got that answer. You don't even have to worry about it. You don't want to wait to the end and be like, so I wanted to ask about the training. Is it going to be out of town? So now the person's thinking, oh, this person may have an issue with it. So what is my point? As the situation arises, you have your 3 or 4 questions. Don't wait to the end. Now, if none of those, there was no opportunity to ask any other question that you may have, and they ask you, okay, do you have any further questions? Then you can ask. Things that I tend to ask that are okay is, number one, how long has the job been vacant? Because you need to know, am I walking into a mess or am I walking into something new? If it's a new position, you don't have to worry about that. But you may want to ask, when will the project start? That may be something that you want to know. What will my first 90 days look like? These are all questions. You don't want to ask about money. I'm going to tell you why in a second. But you want to ask about those things. Okay, will we be training at the site? Things that make sense, right? Those things you would want to ask, right? Those are all questions that you want to ask. What not to ask, don't ask about money. Why? Because number one, remember, they're comparing you, I hate to say it, to the next guy. Oftentimes, that person that is interviewing you has to go back to HR, to supervisor, whomever, unless they own is the manager or the business owner. And even with that, they still need to go back. They need to reflect. They need to figure out who has the best experience, who would fit the best. And then they have to think about what they want to offer you. Most jobs have a range. It could be between 18 and 30 based upon how you answered your question. Oh, I really like Sarah. She was really good. When she talked about that team project, she has a good mentality on her head. And I think that she could actually be a project lead. I may want to offer her 24. They have to think about it. So you can't ask them, how much money am I going to get? You don't know yet. They have to think it through. By that same, and along that same vein, you need to go back and you need to, reflect on what just happened. Wait a minute, Mr. Timothy was talking about having to do 2 projects instead of 1. That wasn't in the job description, and I'm going to have to travel. Am I okay with that? I was thinking I could start at 20, but they may have to offer me 24. Then what happens? Whatever they come up with, they'll send you, hey, we want to offer you 24. If you wanted 24, all the stars have aligned, accept your job and be on your merry way. Now, I'm not telling you to do what I'm about to say, because I don't want anybody saying they didn't take a job. Typically what happens, if they offer you 22 and you were like, hey, I wanted 24, this is where the negotiation comes in at. What is standard is you write back to HR and go, oh, I'm so happy to be, considered for this position. Because there would be a lot of travel involved, which I didn't anticipate. I was thinking 24 would be more appropriate because of X, Y, and Z. And that's where that negotiation comes. And they go back and they say, oh, okay, we can do 24, right? That's what happens in the real world. It doesn't always happen when you first start a job, though. So I'm just going to be honest with you, right? So I'm just teaching you what typically happens. Sometimes a job would say the hard number is 24. That's all we got. And most times they'll tell you that at the front of the at the screening. So if you get to the end of this interview process and you go back home and you're like, okay, is this really a 24 hour job? It is, then you're okay with that. But if you go back, you be like, man, they tripping. They want to, this job is like 30 bucks an hour. You have to make a decision whether you want it or not, but you can't make that decision on the front end. That's why you don't really talk about money until after you've interviewed and you really understand what the job is. Does that make sense? Now, it's okay to ask for a range because you need to know, listen, I can't go below 20 anyway. So if it's like 18, then yeah, that doesn't even make sense to talk. But that is why you really don't talk about salary until you fully understand what the job is and they can get a sense of who you are. Something else that you can ask is where are they in the hiring process? You need to know, am I the first candidate and y'all are going to be, interviewing for the next 3 weeks, or am I the last candidate and you'll be making a decision for next week? That's perfectly fine to ask them where they are in an interview process. You should continue looking for jobs anyway, but if they're in the beginning stages of the interviewing process, you already know, listen, I'm still putting on my resume. I'm still going on interviews. These people have 3 weeks. And then on top of that, they have to then figure out between me and whoever else that comes up after me, I'm not going to hang all, my hat on this job. I need to continue to look, right? So it's totally okay to ask them where they are. And that way you don't reach out to them prematurely if they're still interviewing. Make sense, guys? Do you have any questions? Hmm? Now you see why we want you guys to do a practice interview? Nice. This is why we want you to do mock interviews, because we want you to practice the behavioral and stress and general questions. Like, we don't want you stumbling around. We want you to get comfortable with it. And the best place to do it is at school. That's what school is about, right? A school is about practicing. You're not supposed to be perfect right now. You wouldn't even need us. This is why we want you to practice. Sounds good? All right. You guys know what to do the night before, right? Please don't. Oh, listen. Do I have a story for everything? I do. Did I have a candidate show up on a growling stomach? Yes. You know how embarrassing that was? This person showed up to an interview. It was in New York. I don't know what it is about my New York meetings, but most of the situations came from when I worked in New York. And the person did not eat. I don't know if they only had coffee, but the person's stomach growled so loudly throughout the entire interview. Why is that the only thing I remember? See how embarrassing that is? That was almost 15 years ago, and I remember this person's stomach. Don't be that person, okay? Get enough sleep. Don't come there looking crazy. Now, let me talk about myself. I remember when that happened. Um, okay, it wasn't, no, it was like 12 years ago because I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my daughter. And I kept falling asleep in one of the interviews because the person spoke too softly. And my boss, my CEO, had to kick me underneath the table. She kicked me underneath the table because the person was speaking so softly. And I was pregnant and I was sleepy. Don't talk too softly in an interview and make the pregnant lady fall asleep. Okay, now. Anyway, I have a lot of interview horror stories. All right, my friends, here is your question for today. I want you to name 3 things you are looking for in a company. 3 things. Have you even thought about that? What am I looking for in a company? 3 things that you are looking for in a company. Don't list money. Everybody wants money. Please don't treat me like that. We know that. What 3 things are you looking for in a company? Let me give you a hint. It should have something to do with your long-term goals. My friends, Please come early tomorrow. Let me tell you right now, tomorrow is midterm testing. Even if you've done it already, you're ahead of the game. We will not be on here. You come here past 10, 15, just go straight to the video. We're not going to be here. We're not going to be here. We are coming in here. We're talking briefly. I'm going to give you your live participation question, and then I'm going to release you to go take your test. I'm not going to waste your time tomorrow. My friends, do not come here. If we're not here, don't say something's wrong with the video. Ain't nothing wrong with the video. We're just gone. Just go watch the video. All right? That's what we're doing tomorrow. We're testing. Remember, the test is open all through Sunday. All right, y'all. Thank you guys so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the interaction. If you don't have anything else from me, I'll talk